Okay, I guess we can get started. Good afternoon to everyone here. My name is Ken Mahoney. I'm currently chair of the Muskegon County Commission, but more importantly, I'm vice chair of the White Lake Area Public Advisory Council. Before we start, let me advise or acknowledge a few of the local officials who are here. Some of them will be speaking later, but we have Randy Lydens from the City Council in Montague. We have Wes Weesies, Township Clerk, there we go. It's so important I couldn't remember. Township Clerk in Montague, Jeff King, Supervisor of Montague Township, John French with the City of Montague as the City Manager, and did I miss anybody? Marianne Bard and Trustee of Fruitland, and Sam St. Amour, Supervisor of Fruitland. Did I miss anybody? Oh, yeah. I'll introduce them later as they're speaking later. Okay. Thank you.
Trying to help out.
On July 20th, 2011, I introduced speakers who explained to us the White Lake Shoreline Restoration Project, Habitat Restoration Project, with a long name to remember, and I'm sure we didn't really know the extent of that project at that time. I hope you're as excited as I am to hear what's happened with the project since the pine tree introduction. It's been one of the biggest projects ever, and it's anticipated to enhance the ecology of the lake and improve the quality of life of the humans that happen to be around here too. The project's been fascinating to watch as it unfolded around the lake, and it certainly created a buzz in the community as everyone coming up to me and others saying, well, what the heck are they doing? The energy required acquiring the grant, pulling together, pardon me, my teleprompter is slow, detailed plan for the project and then executing the restoration was endless. For all of that, we have to thank the Muskegon Conservation District and the many local contractors who performed the challenging jobs. We also owe thanks to our longtime state partners as well as the federal partners and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative that provided funding for the project. This project marks an important turning point for White Lake. After many years of steady progress in restoring one of the community's top assets, we've gotten close to the close of Phase 1. We can see that delisting being removed as an area of concern is actually within reach. This is not the end, however. It's up to us and the future folks to be vigilant to protect the gains that have been made and to reach ever-increasing goals for White Lake the Beautiful. Judging from how the community has reacted in the past, I'm sure you are all up to the task. Now, let's hear about the project from Jeff Auk, the Executive Director of the Muskegon County Conservation District. Mr. Auk.
Okay, just a couple quick reminders before I forget. There is an outreach and education component as part of this project that involves community surveys. So if you have not filled one out or have not received the link and done so, make sure that your contact information is the sign-in sheet over here, and Tanya will send you that information so that you can fill out the survey. The other reminder, there are site tours happening this afternoon. There were several this morning. 4 o'clock, the Causeway, so the site right outside the windows here. 5 p.m. Svensson Park, and 6 o'clock Mill Pond Park. So if you'd like to join those, please do. So let me get started here. I'm going to give you the super summary here, the kind of the Super Bowl of the project, and do it very quickly because there's lots of sites that we worked on. But I think, Ken mentioned it best, is that this project was not only to the benefit of the local community, but was largely driven by the talents of those local contractors, local engineers, local people that are driving this project forward. If you remember, when we first began this, we were looking at 7 basic sites that we needed to restore in order to impact the fish and wildlife within White Lake. The original design was to utilize these priority sites that were situated around the lake, red being the highest priority, then orange, then yellow, then green. In writing the actual grant for the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, we said that if we could work on the highest priority, the red sites, we could make a dramatic difference. Pulling in some of the additional sites, the orange sites, which included Occidental Chemical Shoreline area, and then partnering with South Shore Development for some of the restoration that they were actually doing as part of their mitigation, we could accomplish removal of these impairments. We set some specific goals that I put up there. So just over 5,000 lineal feet of shoreline we needed to impact, 35 acres of wetland or aquatic habitat, 8 acres of riparian or upland habitat corridors, and just over 27,000 cubic yards of shoreline debris material. So in working on those sites, if we can reach those management action goals, then we can move towards removing these 2 impairments, fish and wildlife. So we started off again with 7 sites. These were the original 7. And I kind of broke out Causeway because there were 2 sides to Causeway, and by the time we got started we said, okay, there's Causeway North and Causeway South. So Causeway South being the Whitehall side, Svensson Park, Mill Pond Park, Montague Boat Launch, Occidental Chemical, Ravenswood, and Tannery Bay East. You can't really see the color differentiation here, but Tannery Bay East ended up not being one of the restoration sites because of what was happening on Lake Street there, which is a good thing. But it shifted some of the design components that we were looking at. So we added some additional sites. Maple Grove Park, Causeway North, which is the Weather Vane side. They actually own all the property we'll be working on. And the Montague dump site. So here comes the fast and furious part, okay? So I'll give you a little summary of kind of what was happening at each of the sites and some of the activities. You'll notice that a lot of the final sites, or the final pictures, don't actually show this is a completed site because we're still working on some of the activities and some of the restoration work at those sites. So they're not going to be fully vegetated. Some of the components aren't complete, but the main management actions are done, meaning all the excavation, all the material has been moved. So Mill Pond Park, for those of you who have been out there, not only along the shoreline but in the upland area, so lots of concrete and debris. That site, basically on the Whitehall side, as you're driving down the road, that was the original shoreline for White Lake. So anything lakeward of there was actually fill. So we looked at trying to restore areas, not by completely removing all of that fill, but restoring them so that they're functionally, or they're ecologically functional, so that they improve wetlands. You introduce habitat sections within those areas. So along the shoreline here, not only softening but removing that material. Again, this one's kind of hard to see, but debris both in the water, on the shoreline, in the upland areas. Lots of invasive species at this site. And in restoring that site, so not only was it actually an old lumbering property, so obviously lots of debris, but we were able to find some delineation of some original wetland acreage that we restored, creating some ponds, enhancing the open water that already exists on the site. And for those of you who remember, when you first went to that site, it was kind of this thin corridor that existed on the park. All the other vegetation that you saw was 99% exotic species. So just in removing that, you saw a dramatic difference in the look and feel of the site.
Where is this though?
So this is standing in the parking lot looking out towards the lake. So not only included upland areas, but also shoreline areas, trying to restore the functionality, how the water flowed and how it interacted with the lake itself, the wetland zones. So this is right along the shoreline. You'll see these in almost all the sites. I think this is going to be my signature left at White Lake here, but adding large trees back into the system. Here's one of those wetland areas that's excavated, and you can see there's all types of lumbering mill debris and material that's there. Some of that's staying on site. Some of it was removed, but basically integrating what's there into into the new habitat design. Svensson Park was another interesting site. Originally a drain that went straight through the site. Didn't really have a lot of functionality as far as wetlands, wasn't connected to the adjacent wetland in Tannery Bay. So trying to reconnect the hydrology there, so the easiest way was actually to create a small stream system. Keep the original drain in place, have this meandering stream that goes through the site, and then also working on the shoreline itself. Again, a site that was kind of choked by exotic species, created some shallow wetland areas just off the front edge of the property, and then creating some micro-topography, so some lower levels, higher levels. And then in this back, you can see there's cattails and phragmites that are also, will be an ongoing effort for a lot of these sites, is to help to control that. There's one of Jeff's signature trees again. And here's the other end. This is when the stream corridor was first being established, blocking off the culvert so we can get the soil stabilized, but recreating kind of this natural floodplain wetland area to enhance the property. Causeway South, or City of Whitehall, was an interesting site. So kind of traditional way to restore or to protect the shoreline was adding riprap. So whether that's limestone or cobblestone, cement debris, basically hardening the shoreline. All kinds of interesting fill in there. I think we, Craig, correct me if I'm wrong, we found a headstone that was in a couple headstones. So kind of
exactly right on that.
So all kinds of interesting things that you find at these sites. So basically, looking at that entire area, trying to soften the shoreline. Here's another area, so a different type of fieldstone in that area. Here's some of the initial construction taking place, just pulling that out. There's also some engineering techniques to lock in the soil, some grid work that had to come out. So again, all kinds of interesting stuff that was there. Jeff's signature tree, one of many. Here's getting towards the end of the process. You can see several trees within the water. The interesting part about this site, when we did the initial design, this shelf here was supposed to be just below the water surface, was supposed to be a shallow emergent wetland. So all of you know how much the water has changed. It's probably 18 to 24 inches out of the water now. So it provided us some other opportunities, but it made for some interesting challenges in the process. One of the things is, not only did we want to reintroduce native habitat, but try to get it as a benefit to the community as far as interacting with that habitat. So putting in areas where people can get down to the water. So a series of stairs and fishing platforms, kind of utilizing that bottom shelf that was suddenly recreated. And this was this last spring, some student volunteers helping out with some additional planting on the site. This site in Svensson Park were the only ones that kind of were in full bloom this year, or the initial bloom, as they were seeded the year before. So the other ones will start to come into their loveliness here. So just wait. Also at this site, creating a rain garden to address the stormwater coming off of parking lots. Again, trying to restore the hydrology and the habitat that was in this area. Montague boat launch. So it included not only shoreline work, but also what is the Water Street 2 track. Basically, if you were to take Water Street right behind the condominiums here and keep going, was all fill that was in that area. So we found some interesting things. So a couple of 55-gallon drums, which fortunately were no hazardous material, but coming across those in the process. You can see some of the other debris that was in there. So general construction debris, cement, pipes, metal, rebar, you name it. There you can see other wire and a lot of sand casting material that was in that site. Basically taking 6 to 8 feet of fill and taking all of that out there and restoring it to a wetland area. That one's probably hard to... Wes or somebody, can you hit those? Yeah, it helps a little bit. So this is after it's all been taken down. You can see there's some areas where there's open water in there, but basically restoring the wetland, then planting it with wetland trees and vegetation to how the natural conditions would have actually been. The shoreline work was fairly small in scope in that site. So again, looking at the riprap or hardened shoreline, this is going towards the boat launch itself. Putting in these coconut fiber logs to stabilize one of Jeff's classic trees, native seeding in that area, and then we're going to do continued exotic species management on that site. So there's one side of the boat launch, there's the other side. Ravenswood, so this site, hardened shoreline, a large expanse of an area that we could change to natural conditions. So pulling out a seawall that was not only failing but not functional anymore. Initial pulling out of that seawall with the slope on that site, and then slowly building or terracing the site back up to the top of that bottom shelf there. So again, providing some sort of protection for once water comes up, but also stabilizing the site, providing site topography. And there's some of the plantings. So let me back up here. So this is kind of the skeleton of the site itself, helping to stabilize the slope. Then soil was added on top of this so that you get a nice smooth slope going down to the water itself. And that's this. So then it was had a mulch blanket that was placed on top, planted, seeded. Down in this area we added some of the large woody debris structures, and so that site turned out very nicely. And then that's going to integrate into the future development of that site as well. So this wasn't something just to do and not take into account what else was going to happen, but take into account the future development for the site itself. Occidental Chemical was an interesting site from a couple different components. So again, a lot of material and debris along the shoreline. So concrete rebar pipes, a lot of more construction debris to stabilize that shoreline. A lot of invasive exotic species. So tree of heaven, black locust. So several acres of the site, that material was taken out. We also had to deal with some historical items that were found at the site, part of the original religious retreat that was there. The stairway, there's a foundation up at top. So respect the history of the site, so leaving the stairway in place and working around that area. For those of you who have been at the site, you also know that there's terracing that goes down the slope itself. So leaving that terracing in place, but making it natural, or reintroducing habitat to those terraces. Working on the shoreline itself. Again, a lot of the woody trees along the shoreline.
Is that the Loch Ness Monster in the front of that?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
Okay, good.
We tried to trap him at one point, but he's pretty quick. So then actually pulling back the shoreline, the original shoreline was out here near where the logs were and kind of the coconut fiber rolls. So pulling that entire shoreline back to create an emergent or low wetland area, restabilizing at a higher elevation, and then also making sure that it integrates with the future use of the site for Occidental Chemical. So there's a look, kind of looking out towards the peninsula there, some of the initial work for the exotic species removal. You can see after a lot of those materials were pulled out, so the site was stumped, the black locust and the tree of heaven, there was a lot of material there. And then just recently they completed the construction of the pond area, so the open water section within that peninsula itself. So There's still some activity that needs to wrap up that site, but major excavation is complete. So those were kind of the original, part of the original 6. So the next 3, which we're working on, or will be working on starting this year, Montague landfill. So that's right over here next to the bike trail. So the old municipal landfill. So just initial walk out on the site, you could find all sorts of debris. Did some clearing of the trees that were out there, basically planted on top of or grew on top of the dump site itself. Not a high quality forest system. Removing that material out of there. Doing soil excavation, trenches across the site so we can classify the soils. And if you look at just the material there, so it's sand casting, there's bottles, there's metal, there's all kinds of stuff basically in that profile from the water level all the way up to the existing elevation. There's another view of kind of where it was basically slowly pushed into the wetland area. All that material is going to come out of that site and the wetland being restored. And hopefully some future recreational funding to put in a boardwalk system or something at that site. Am I doing on time, Ken? I'm doing good, I think. Yep. Causeway North or the weather vane Inn, so right over here. The weather vane basically owns the property, not only the peninsula itself, but along the causeway. So working on this site, taking out the riprap, the hardened material, shortening the end of the peninsula a little bit where there was some historical fill, and working not only on the peninsula itself, but also along the causeway and bike trail there. So now as you come across, they will look identical or look contiguous versus having one complete and not the other side not complete. So we'll integrate those 2 sites together. Maple Grove Park, this one is a little bit hard to see. Most of the work that's going to take place here is within the water itself. So there's a zone where they were not only filling the existing wetland on the shoreline itself, but also push fill into the water. So you can see just off to the east, so there's some material sticking up there. Lots of invasive exotic species that are happening at that site. Some material that's in the water itself. So cleaning all that material not only out of the aquatic area, but restoring the upland zone to a wetland condition. All right, so that was the quick and dirty spiel of all the projects. So one of the things that we were looking at is the ecological benefits of these projects to the area. So currently we're doing marsh monitoring both for amphibians and for birds to see what happens in the future with these restorations taking place. You can notice in a lot of these pictures, so even after we just completed some of the restoration work, wildlife started using the sites, those components immediately. This is at the causeway with a lot of Jeff's signature trees there. If you count, there's about 45 turtles lined up on those logs just a couple days after they were installed. So readily being utilized. There's another picture. Great blue herons, utilizing all the sites. Red-winged blackbird, high-billed grebe, blue-winged teal, green heron, red-winged blackbird, wood duck. So again, things are starting to utilize these sites immediately. Our photographer also has been trying to capture the fisheries. So how's that interacting? So putting these log structures in provides protection for those small fry. It's a little hard to capture little minnows moving around through the system, but again, instantly noticing that fishery species utilizing these sites. If you get a chance and you're in a boat and you're driving past Occidental, especially early in the morning, all of a sudden you see all these boats lined up in front of the shoreline and they're casting lures under the logs. And so they are being utilized by fish and wildlife in the area. Community benefits as well, increased recreational use. Some of the community couldn't even wait till the projects were done. This was at Mill Pond Park during construction. You can see there's still some debris along the shoreline. Family instantly went out to utilize the site now, having ready access. This is the causeway, was just kind of captured in the back there, but using those fishing platforms to access areas. So how do we do in our restoration goals? So this grant was used to specifically address some goals, some numbers. So this is what we have completed. This is not even with those last 3 sites that we have to do. And these aren't final numbers, so I believe they'll increase even further. So our initial goal was 5,158 lineal feet of shoreline. Currently we have 6,950 lineal feet. We had 35 acres of wetland and aquatic habitat, 37.3 acres. 8 acres of riparian upland habitat corridors, 10.6. And then the last one, 27,134 cubic yards of shoreline debris. Initial estimate, 41,200 yards of cubic debris. Again, this is not including the last 3 sites. So a lot of work took place. And it's not complete yet. All right, and I'm saying this because I don't want this to be my mission accomplished moment, because we still have 3 sites that we need to do. But we've reached the goal of what we needed to do with this project and the funding to remove the fish and wildlife impairments. So we can use this over the next couple months to actually remove these impairments, even with all the work that we still need to do and still need to accomplish for the lake. So in the next 6 to 12 months, begin the paperwork for removal of the 2 impairments. There are some other things that we need to tie up. Initiate construction of the final 3 sites. Finalize management plans and conservation easements for each of the sites. Remove remaining beneficial use impairments. So even if we get all this work done, there's still 2 impairments that we're working on: aesthetics and drinking water. So we'll be working on those as well. In the next 2 to 3 years, there's going to be some weeding that our office will be doing, general site management with the partners. So our intent is not to say, okay, we've completed these projects, City of Whitehall, you're on your own, Star City, Montague, take care of it, but to help to make sure that these sites are a success. Lake-wide exotic species control. We are currently working on a grant, or have funding from a grant, to acquire additional public lands for the long-term benefit of the lake. Acquisition being oriented so that it's adjacent to these restoration sites, so further enhancement and protection. Seeking funding for additional marine debris removal. Seeking funding for additional recreational enhancements at each of the sites. And then also continue fish and wildlife projects. Again, when we're done, we're not walking away. In fact, it's very hard for me to walk away from these sites living just up the hill here. So being a part of this community, I want to make sure that they're a success as well. And this is probably going to be the toughest part, because I know I'm going to forget somebody. So if I forget you, all the people that I need to thank. So these were the original project stakeholders. All the municipalities around the lake signed in support of this project. Muskegon County, the White Lake Area Chamber of Commerce, both of the schools, Alcoa Howmet, at that time Congressman Peter Hoekstra, and State Representative Mary Valentine. So they were ones that helped to get this project started. Engineers and consultants, Schultz Land and Water Consulting, West Shore Consulting, Netterveld, Fleece and Vandenbrink Engineering, and Tanya Kabbalah. So I think these 5 kind of help share the vision of the project. So what do we need to accomplish? How do we do that? They dealt with me when I said, yes, we need to put in big trees at this site. They kind of helped to share and spread that vision as well. 3 main site contractors: Thompson Brothers, White Lake Excavating, and Double L Excavating. So again, they shared the dream, the vision to do the restoration. So many thanks to them. Subcontractors: Weesies Brothers Farms, Montague Tree Farm, Osborne Trucking, Cardno JF New, West Michigan Tree Service, Winberg Construction, John Short Logging, and I probably missed somebody in that list. Photo credits, Raj Wilmers and Jerry Brady, so helped with the photo documentation and providing all of these great photos. Individuals, so some of these are parts of municipalities, but also individuals themselves. Brian Armstrong, Scott Huebler, Connie Compagna, Tom Hamilton, Steve Hammond, John French, Matt Miller, Joe Branch, and then two of my staff members, Chad Hipshire and Dallas Goldberg, were instrumental in moving these sites and these projects forward. So thank you to you. Lots of student and adult volunteers helped as well once the sites were installed to kind of do additional plantings and site management. Private landowners, so South Shore Development, Ravenswood Development Group, Occidental Chemical, Weather Vane Inn. Municipal landowners, City of Whitehall and City of Montague. Thank you. You were the largest contributor to this project, making it a success. State and federal, Michigan DEQ, special thanks to John Riley, who's in the audience someplace.
Yes.
Julie Sims, who was with the DEQ and is now with NOAA. Nancy Kunkanen, who does the permitting for DEQ. So all three very instrumental in moving this forward. Michigan DNR, Rich O'Neill. So Rich and I talked at length on what do we need for fisheries habitat. One of the things that we did come up with that's really lacking in the system is that large woody debris. So that material needs to be reintroduced to the site. U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, specifically John Piraconi, again instrumental in moving this forward and has been a supporter for a long time. And even with the elections, our current representatives, congressmen, and senator are in full support of this project. So Representative Holly Hughes, Representative Marcia Hovey-Wright, Senator Jeff Hansen, and Congressman Bill Huizenga. So all of them have been instrumental in these kind of last stages as we wrap up. Wouldn't be a thank you list without saying thanks to the community, to the White Lake Public Advisory Council, all the members of that, obviously to the EPA and the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. So you can see a long list, and I also want to point out, if you kind of think back in that list, almost all of the contractors and subcontractors and people involved were 95% local. So one of the intent of this project, not only restore habitat, but drive the local economy. So putting that money back into the restoration activities. And if any of you want to contact me, additional questions, that's me. And thanks for coming today.
Thank you, Jeff. Very informative. Give us a clear view of what was going on or is going on at this point. I did fail to mention Mr. John Riley of MDEQ being here. He's been a great assistant to the White Lake area PAC in this project and in other things. Now it's my honor or whatever to introduce Mr. Rick Hoglia of the Office of Great Lakes, Michigan Department of Environmental Quality. He's been involved in the cleanup of Michigan's Great Lakes area of concerns, including White Lake, for many years, and is currently the chief of the state's Area of Concern program. Rick?
Thank you, Ken. I'd like to welcome everybody on behalf of Michigan's Office of the Great Lakes, which is part of the Department of Environmental Quality. As many of you may know, we've had a recent change in leadership. Our previous director, Patty Burkholz, resigned a couple of weeks ago. Just this past week, our new director, John Allen, has come on board. While he would have liked to have been here today, he had a long-standing family commitment to be in Ohio this weekend, so he was unable to be here. I haven't had much time to talk with John Allen yet, but we did have an opportunity this past week to talk a little bit about the Area of Concern program and the progress we've been making. When I told him that we had a couple of AOCs that were near delisting, He specifically asked whether I thought any of them would reach that milestone over the next year. And he was fairly excited when I told him that White Lake might just fall into that category. For those of you who may not know a lot about the Area of Concern program, the areas of concern were first identified in the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement that was signed in '87. And over time there have been about 43 total areas of concern in the Great Lakes region. Roughly 30 of them are in the United States, or partially in the United States. Some of them are shared waters with Canada. 14 of those are in Michigan, either completely or partially. In all that time, there have only been a total, I think, of 4 areas of concern that have actually achieved delisting. 3 in Canada and only 1 in the U.S. And thus far, none of the Michigan AOCs have reached that milestone. But White Lake could very well be on target to be the first, so we're very excited about that. The habitat work that we're celebrating today has been a huge step in that direction. Before we got here, we came up here a little bit earlier, and John Riley was able to give me a quick tour of some of the sites. We didn't get to all of them, but you guys have done a tremendous job. And over and over again, what John kept telling me is, "Wow, this really looks different." And I heard that again and again. So there's been a lot of significant changes and improvements just in the past year as a result of this project. Jeff just went through a fairly extensive listing of all the various people who need to be thanked, and I'm not going to do that in any detail, but just very briefly, I particularly want to thank the White Lake Public Advisory Council for all your work over the last 20 years. I know some of you have been at that for a really long time. I want to particularly note the work of the Muskegon Conservation District under Jeff's leadership, who took on this project and done a tremendous job with it. We recognize that there are many local governments, in particular the cities of Whitehall and Montague, but also the local townships that have been involved in all this, and we appreciate that. Of course, we're grateful to EPA for providing the funding for the grant, and also to our congressional representation for their support of the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and for investing in our community and in our future. When I asked John Riley ahead of time if there was anything specific that he thought I should cover during my remarks, one of the things that he told me to be sure to mention is how appreciative we are of the engagement of the White Lake community. Not just the PAC, but even the local folks who are not directly involved in the PAC. It seems like whenever there is a public meeting like this, there are a lot of people that are very thoughtful, very engaged, very interested in what's going on in White Lake, and willing to spend some time discussing it, providing their opinion, helping out where they can. And that type of involvement makes our work both much easier and also much more rewarding. So I want to thank all of the members of the White Lake community for your enthusiastic support. I was very pleased earlier to hear during Ken's remarks his mention that this was really, we're heading towards the completion of phase 1. While the delisting of the White Lake area of concern is very important to our program, I'm sure that with all of the interest and involvement here that in some form this group will continue to work on restoring, protecting, and enhancing White Lake, and the Department of Environmental Quality is looking forward to a continuing partnership in that work. So in closing, I want to thank all the members of the White Lake community and let you know that we're looking forward to a really big party in a year or two when we finally achieve that delisting. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Appreciate the thoughts and the words. Now I have some perspectives of local partners. I'll just list them all if they would come up in the order that they wish. We have Kevin Erb, Mayor of the City of Montague, Scott Huebler, City Manager of the City of Whitehall, Dave Schultz of Schultz Land and Water Consulting, and Ryan Weesies of the Weesies Brothers Farms. So, and give a local perspective of what's going on.
I'll keep it brief. I only got 7 pages, so no. But no, I'm Kevin Erb I'm Mayor of the City of Montague, And I guess on behalf of the city of Montague, I'd like to just say that we are very pleased to participate in the restoration projects for a number of reasons. We appreciate the opportunity to contribute to the health of White Lake. We had 2 public sites, being the old city dump, and then also the boat launch area, and then also 1 private site, being Ravenswood, targeted in these projects. We also believe that by restoring the native habitat, we will improve the wildlife population, which will be good for the environment, and also improve the recreational activities such as boating, fishing, and wildlife viewing. So also the third reason would be that it kind of helped the local economy around here with some giving work to some of the local companies and creating jobs for them. So I guess in closing, just want to say that we believe this is a very important project, and with the ongoing sites, the dump and Maple Grove Park, that will be continued, and we look forward to it. Thank you.
And I get to follow the well-dressed mayor from Montague. I've been out on the soccer field since 9 o'clock this morning, so hopefully you'll forgive my casual attire. And the Whitehall Vikings took the district 2-0 over Ludington. It's almost embarrassing for Jeff to have actually listed my name up there on credits, because typically Jeff gives me a call, says, "Scott, I got an idea for a project," and I cut him off and say yes. And that's about the extent of my efforts, because I know Jeff and his staff do a great job, and the city's got a ton of trust and faith in what he does. The city of Whitehall has had a long tradition of environmental activism, if you will, with Coke Chemical, the tannery. We've got a wellhead protection program which actually outreached into Fruitland Township as well as Whitehall Township. And we've been getting increasingly more involved in green projects, such as this one. And it's been a pleasure to partner with Jeff and his staff with our extensive shoreline and having 3 of these sites in the city. You know, the wildlife habitat restoration, the shoreline restoration, the removal of the invasive species only made sense from our perspective to get involved in this. And I will say, Connie's in the audience. Connie and Brian are the ones who were hitting the ground with Jeff and his staff out there. If you know Connie, she takes care of our parks and our shorelines and the environment to heart, probably more than anybody I've ever met. So a lot of kudos go to Connie out there, and hopefully I'm making her really embarrassed.
You are.
But I know that this project has been a win-win-win. The environment has benefited, the White Lake has benefited, the city has benefited, as well as the community of White Lake in its entirety. And on behalf of the mayor, Jeff, and the rest of the city council, we really appreciate and thank what Jeff and his staff have done on this project.
Guess I'm cutting in front of you here. I don't know what else to really say. You took care of all the thank yous and everything. Originally, when we got involved with this project, Craig Beiseisen from White Lake Excavating came up and asked if we would like to do this with him. And of course we said yes, but then he said, you know, I don't want it to just be us. I want it to be us and a couple other contractors too. Osborne being one of them, and Montague Tree Farm being another one. I thought that was kind of neat that he wanted to do that, so we both said, yeah, that'd be a great idea, and went forward from there. Just to bring more than just one contractor onto each site and try to make it really part of the community and bring more people from the community into these sites. It was a little bit of a challenge, you know, setting up schedules and that kind of thing, but all in all, it worked out really, really well for us, and we were happy to do that. So, other than that, just seeing, you know, how it's impacted the lake shore, and seeing kids fishing and stuff like that out here on the causeway. That was one of the jobs we worked on. That was really neat to see. And it's something that I can always tell my kids down the future, hey, you know, I grew up in this community, and this is something that we did to help the lake shore. So helped our company, kind of pushed us into doing more native plantings. In fact, we do a lot of landscaping on the lakeshore. And people kind of ask, hey, we saw you guys working down at the causeway, or saw you working at this site. What are you doing down there? And we tell them, and then they, oh, tell me a little bit more about that. And it actually helped push us into growing a lot of native plants that maybe normally you can't really get from many places around here. So overall, it's been a great experience, and I'd like to thank Jeff for getting us involved with it. And of course, White Lake Excavating, because they were our general on this whole project. So thank you for everyone being involved. So.
Hello, my name's David Schultz, and I'm an engineer that was involved on 3 and almost 4 of the habitat restoration projects we're here to celebrate today. I was introduced to White Lake many years ago, taking swimming lessons from Miss America down at the bathing beach, up the lake a little bit. At that young age, I didn't know every town didn't have a Miss America, and I didn't know every lake was the color of strong tea. Through many years of traveling the country from stem to stern, I've been amazed at the beauty, that the resources we have. And White Lake is right there toward the top of my list for, parochial reasons. But through that time and through my education, I also learned just how much we had injured and insulted our native habitat. And these habitats and resources are the framework of the web of life that truly is our most important safety net. 35 years ago, we started making a turn where we put in the sewer systems, in Montague at least, and we are very grateful for the help that the state and federal government gave at that time, because it would have cost $18 million in today's dollars, something small communities just can't get their arms around. But now we're completing several projects that were not intended to stop the insults, but to actually heal some of the injuries that we've inflicted through the years. And again, I'm thankful for the help of the state and federal authorities that help make these projects possible. And I'm also thankful for the grantsmanship and leadership of the Muskegon Conservation District in assembling and implementing these projects. And I'm honored and most thankful for being able to partake in these projects as a designer and as an engineer. And to tell you the truth, the Conservation District and the contractors we had on the job made my job embarrassingly easy. Removing steel, wood, and stone and replacing them with geofabrics and soils and vegetation and some stone is not without risks. And removing invasive plant species and replacing them with native stock involves some vigilance down the road. And we must be prepared to maintain and repair these biological systems we put in place to make sure they're here long after we're gone. And we must anticipate that this will fall on our shoulders. With the financial problems we're now encountering nationwide, we can't expect the state or federal government to continue coming to our rescue. So we need to begin preparing to find local solutions to local problems, with more volunteerism and more people ponying up out of their own pocket. Hopefully we'll all see the benefit that these projects have done to our own well-being. Thank you.
Let me just make a couple of quick announcements. Remember to sign in if you haven't, and that will get you a survey link that you can do online. We would appreciate you doing that. Tours are still going to be ongoing this afternoon. I believe we have, I'll get my list here. At 4 o'clock we'll be doing the Whitehall Causeway, 5 o'clock Svensson Park, and 6 o'clock the Mill Pond Park. And I'd like to thank the speakers and all of the attendees here for making this a successful program. And I'd like to thank also Dave Ross and the Ellenwood Marina Clubhouse for hosting this event, and the Chamber for supplying the chairs that we're all relaxing in, and City of Whitehall for providing me something to lean on. And Debbie does dishes for the cups. Thanks again. Thanks for coming.